The Invisible Wound: How Emotional Neglect Shapes Your Adult Life and the Path to Healing. Imagine a small, vulnerable child sitting alone in a silent room, utterly surrounded by people, family, caretakers, who nonetheless never look up, never truly listen, never genuinely see them. The television hums monotonously in the background, a constant low-level drone of distraction. Adult conversations, the important, loud narratives of others, pass above the child's head like noise, and their own small voice, their attempt to connect, their vulnerable plea for attention or validation, disappears instantly into the crushing vacuum of profound indifference. Now, imagine that same child growing up, moving through decades, still instinctively trying to be heard, still chasing a kind of conditional love that never quite learned their name. A love always just out of reach, like a ghost. This is far more than just a story of simple childhood unhappiness or neglect. It is a fundamental psychological journey, an unseen odyssey that silently shapes the very foundation of a human being's identity, their capacity for intimacy, and the architecture of their entire emotional world. It is the story of how an emotional absence becomes a constant, painful presence in adult life. Today, we will embark on a necessary, deep exploration of the hidden wounds of those who grew up emotionally ignored, individuals often called running on empty. We'll meticulously trace how these deep-seated, silent scars echo relentlessly into adulthood, affecting your self-confidence, your ability to form secure attachments, your experience of love, your fundamental capacity for trust, and even the basic way you perceive your own reality and inherent worth. And as we move through this difficult but profoundly vital exploration, I urge you to stay with me until the very end, because the final, powerful revelation, the discovery of the extraordinary strength and wisdom that can be forged from this pain, might completely change the way you see yourself, your past, and others who carry this invisible yet profound wound. The invisible harm, when silence becomes the blueprint. We must first understand that childhood neglect does not always arrive in the brutal form of overt violence or screaming abuse. Is irrelevant. Dr. Jonas Webb, a pioneering psychologist in this field and author of the influential book Running on Empty, Overcome Your Childhood Emotional Neglect, provides the clearest and most essential definition. Emotional neglect is a systemic failure by a parent or caretaker to notice, attend to, or respond appropriately to a child's emotional needs and feelings. This means that even in a home that looks completely functional, where there is physical safety, food on the table, and clothes are folded neatly, there can exist an emotional desert, a vast, isolating space where a child's inner world, their joys, fears, needs, and vulnerable moments is consistently ignored, minimized, invalidated, or dismissed as utterly unimportant. Think deeply about the devastating psychological impact. What happens when a child's genuine, vulnerable tears of sadness or frustration are met with the sharp command, "Stop being dramatic. Just get over it"? What happens when their excitement over an achievement is consistently met with silence or a distracted, dismissive, "That's nice," followed by a quick change of subject? Slowly, tragically, that child learns a core, false lesson about existence. My emotions don't matter. My deepest, most authentic inner experience is a burden to others, and I must hide it or contain it perfectly to stay safe and acceptable. From that moment on, they begin to hide their true self, bury their genuine feelings, or numb them entirely as a primary survival mechanism. They grow up internalizing the crushing belief that love must be fiercely earned through quiet compliance and burdensome self-sufficiency. Over time, their sense of self becomes inextricably tied to invisibility. They learn to be silent, to take up minimal space, to be the least needy person in the room, and they certainly don't dare to ask for more. But beneath that carefully constructed, stoic, calm surface lies a hidden storm, a vast, frozen landscape of unmet needs and unanswered, silent questions about who they truly are. Sigmund Freud once stated, "Unexpressed moment of attunement, where the parent validates and mirrors the child's feeling, shapes the neural architecture responsible for self-worth and the sense of internal safety. When those crucial, scaffolding interactions are missing, the developing brain adapts drastically to survive without emotional feedback. In doing so, it learns to suppress genuine emotion, to disconnect from others as a preventative measure, and to internalize profound shame over their own natural emotional existence. The adult who emerges from such a childhood often struggles with profound emotional alexithymia, an inability to effectively identify, understand, and name their own feelings. Their internal, emotional GPS was never properly calibrated by external validation. They constantly doubt their own validity, their emotional responses, and compulsively search for external validation through relentless achievement, conforming to beauty standards or perfectionism, to fill an internal void of missing self-worth. Yet, what's most tragic about this specific form of neglect is its invisibility, even to the sufferer. Many adults who suffered emotional neglect as children don't even realize it was a factor. They often rationalize their past. My parents were good people. They gave me everything I needed: food, education, shelter. They weren't abusive. And materially, that may be true. But love is not only what is given, it is what is felt, mirrored, and consistently acknowledged. You can grow up in a house full of people, surrounded by activity and life, and still feel profoundly, utterly alone and unseen in your core self. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Hell is other people." For the emotionally neglected child, this becomes a lifelong paradox. They crave connection, but fear it. They want to be seen, but have perfectly mastered the art of hiding. The echo, identity, attachment, and the fear of being too much. Imagine an adult whose entire life is built on the silent, internal rule that their fundamental value is directly proportional to how little space they take up, how little trouble they cause, and how much they give. They learn to stay quiet, to become a people pleaser to an extreme degree, constantly scanning, must suppress and contain who they truly are. Carl Jung referred to this process as the profound formation of the shadow self, the hidden, rejected part of our psyche that contains everything we were forced to repress or deny. For the ignored child, this shadow is filled with unexpressed tears, simmering anger, unmet needs, and a quiet, desperate, buried longing to be acknowledged. But here is the paralyzing paradox that echoes in relationships. As they grow up, they begin to reject in others the very emotions and needs they were forbidden to express in themselves. A person who was never allowed to show appropriate anger will often avoid conflict at all costs, perceiving all confrontation, even healthy disagreement, as dangerous or destructive. Someone who was told to stop crying might feel deeply uncomfortable, tense and anxious with other people's genuine vulnerability, seeing it as overwhelming or manipulative. They become emotional observers rather than active participants, watching life safely from the sidelines because true feeling seems profoundly unsafe and messy. Dr. Alice Miller,
in her pivotal work, The Drama of the Gifted Child, explains that neglected children often become hyper-attuned to others' emotions. They develop a kind of sophisticated emotional radar, constantly scanning the environment for the slightest shift in mood, approval, or disapproval. This makes them highly sensitive, deeply empathetic, and exquisitely understanding of others, a true gift of survival. But it also traps them in a cycle of self-abandonment. They become psychologically responsible for managing and regulating everyone's emotions except their own. Think about the adult who always says, "I'm fine," with an overly bright, strained smile, even when they are breaking inside. The friend who serves as everyone's listener and therapist, but never, ever talks about their own problems. The partner who gives endlessly and perfectly, but cannot receive genuine love, praise, or a compliment without deep guilt or immediate deflection. These are not coincidences. They are profound symptoms of emotional neglect, disguised as admirable qualities like kindness, humility, or radical independence. Emotional neglect also distorts the very foundation of self-identity.
Phil. Dr. Gabor Mate, a renowned physician and trauma expert, reminds us, the essence of trauma is disconnection from ourselves, from others, and from the world. For the emotionally neglected, this profound disconnection becomes their normal, established state of being, leading to chronic loneliness. And yet, here is where the danger of repetition compulsion lies in adult relationships. When you spend your entire life being invisible, you unconsciously start attracting people who benefit from your invisibility, people who are naturally takers or emotionally closed off. The silent child often becomes the invisible partner, the one who carries the entire emotional and practical weight in relationships without asking for anything in return. They end up with friends or lovers who perfectly mirror their childhood, distant, unresponsive, or emotionally unavailable. This repetition is not accidental. It is the psyche's desperate, unconscious attempt to recreate the original wound in the hope of finally healing it with a different, positive outcome. Instead, it almost always leads to deeper pain. The adult paradox, consequences in love, trust, and ambition. Imagine waking up every single morning with a subtle, haunting emptiness that you can't name, an ache you can't locate. You go through your day, you smile perfectly, you work diligently, you interact effortlessly, but something always feels slightly, unnervingly off. You feel as if you are playing a brilliant role in your own life, desperately trying to convince yourself and the world that you belong. That feeling, that invisible gnawing ache, is the persistent echo of the ignored child still living within you, informing every choice. One of the most profound effects of growing up emotionally ignored is the development of avoidant attachment, a primary psychological defense mechanism that makes sustained, deep closeness feel fundamentally unsafe and terrifying. As children, they learned that expressing needs would lead to rejection or painful indifference. As adults, they unconsciously repeat that pattern by maintaining a carefully calibrated emotional distance from everyone. They crave love and belonging, but fear dependency. They deeply want to be understood, but believe at their core no one ever truly will be able to be rescued. This same pattern appears strikingly in ambition and career. Many adults who grew up ignored become extreme high achievers or workaholics. They pour themselves into relentless success, productivity, or perfectionism. Their powerful drive is not truly fueled by internal passion or joy, but by the silent, desperate hope that visibility through achievement equals love and safety. Yet, no matter how much they accomplish, how many accolades they earn, it never feels like enough to quiet the internal void. Because what they truly crave isn't professional recognition. It's human connection and validation of their intrinsic worth. Others go in the opposite direction. Instead of overperforming, they underperform or constantly self-sabotage. They internalize their neglect as proof of unworthiness and become afraid to take any risks or stand out. They stay small, apologetic, and invisible, replicating the exact emotional dynamic of their childhood. Both extremes, overachievement, perfectionism fueled by terror, and self-sabotage, are simply different, powerful expressions of the same internal wound. The desperate need to be seen, yet the terrifying fear of visibility. And when it comes to romantic love, this wound runs deepest. The ignored child often becomes the adult who confuses intense attention or even occasional conflict with genuine love, or silence with safety. They might stay in relationships where they are chronically emotionally starved, believing that is the best they can possibly get, or that they deserve no better. They often settle for partners who perfectly mirror their neglectful parents, unavailable, dismissive, or completely self-absorbed, because the mind finds a toxic comfort in the familiar, even when the familiar hurts the soul and prevents growth. This cycle can only be broken by recognizing the pattern, the path to healing, reclaiming the authentic voice. The deep longing to be seen is not a weakness. It is, in fact, the first courageous step of healing. That desire, that quiet ache, is the ultimate proof that the vibrant, authentic self still fiercely exists inside, waiting patiently to be acknowledged and accepted. Psychotherapist Donald Winnicott spoke eloquently of the true self and the false self. The false self, debilitating people-pleasing. The paralysis caused by fear of confrontation. The constant need to prove your worth. You begin to take your power back. You realize these painful behaviors are not who I am. They are simply who I became to survive a painful, lonely situation. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Step 2. Reparenting. This is the profound, daily act of learning to give yourself exactly what you never received. It means becoming the compassionate, consistent parent your younger self always desperately needed. You begin to listen to your emotions without judgment or dismissing them. You set powerful, non-negotiable boundaries that protect your peace and energy. You comfort your sadness instead of compulsively running from it or numbing it. You learn, for the first time, that love is not something you must frantically earn through performance. It is something you deserve simply because you exist. Dr. Kristin Neff, a pioneer in self-compassion research, explains that true self-compassion is the act of treating yourself with the exact same understanding, kindness, and patience you would immediately offer a dear friend or a small child. For the adult who grew up ignored, this is a radical act of self-reclamation. Healing requires replacing the neural pathways of neglect with those of nurturing and consistency. It is the intensive process of rewiring the emotional operating system of your brain, one gentle act at a time. Step 3. Connection. Emotional neglect isolates us not just from others, but most dangerously, from our own internal, vital life. Healing happens in relationships, with self and others, where true safety and profound empathy exist. This might mean engaging in therapy, where your story is finally heard, validated, and held without judgment. It might mean cultivating a genuine friendship that values authenticity over perfection, or it might simply mean learning to express how you truly feel, vulnerability, without the paralyzing fear of being too much or causing offense. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, in his seminal work, The Body Keeps the Score, reminds us that trauma is stored in the body, but so is healing. The more extraordinary wisdom. Søren Kierkegaard once said, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." Looking back, you may finally see and understand the invisible chains that once held you in place. forced you into silence, and dictated your choices. But looking forward, you now hold the key to your freedom. Freedom from the toxic belief that you must earn love. Freedom from the silence that taught you to disappear. Freedom from the invisible wounds that defined your story for too long. Because the final liberating truth is this: the adult who was the ignored child carries within them a specific, powerful gift that few others possess. Having lived through the devastating absence of love, they understand its power, its cost, and its complexity more deeply than most. Having known crushing silence, they profoundly value and crave genuine connection. Having endured invisibility, they see others with extraordinary clarity, depth, and empathy. What was once their greatest weakness and pain becomes their profound wisdom and superpower in the world. If you are one of these people, your deep empathy is not a flaw. It is a meticulously crafted gift of survival. It is your superpower. But it must begin with you. The same profound tenderness and validation you so freely show others must finally be given unconditionally to yourself. That's how you break the cycle. That's how you stop frantically chasing external love and start embodying it as intrinsic self-worth. So, take a deep, grounding breath. You are not broken. You were simply unseen, but now you see yourself, and that changes absolutely everything about your future. Remember, the story of the ignored child doesn't end in silence. It ends with awakening, with a powerful, authentic voice, a healed heart, and a life that finally dares to be fully, authentically heard and seen. And that is the greatest victory of all, to have once been invisible and to now exist fully, loudly, and unapologetically.